Of Blood and Steel, written by Seymour Zainali, narrated by James Lawrence. Chapter 7. Tales and Truths. The town was surrounded by a large wooden fence with a watchtower. The gates were closed, so Balak and Arda knocked on the door.
"It's different than what I remember,"
Balak said. They walked through the streets and passed a blacksmith who was working on a sword. Balak watched him heat up the metal, hammer its shining surface, and dip it into a barrel of water. The blacksmith caught his eye.
"Which way is the tavern?"
Balak asked.
"Which one?"
the blacksmith answered.
"Any of them."
Balak gestured towards Arda.
"Sure. At the end of this street, make a right. You'll see the tavern on the left. Golden Arms."
Balak gave the man a nod, and they continued through the streets until they found the tavern. Outside were dozens of horses waiting for their masters. By them, arming squires stood neatly in a row, moving their arms in circles as they cleaned their masters' armor and plates. One particular horse stood out among the rest.
"Have you seen a horse like that before?"
Balak turned his head to look.
"Not like this one."
It was brown in color, like a regular horse, but it was taller and had two humps on its back. Its eyes were vibrant and blue.
"Its eyes look almost human,"
Arda whispered.
"You have a wild imagination,"
Balak scoffed. They saw an old man sitting in front of the entrance. His eyes were covered by a ragged cloth, and he was holding a small cup, begging for money as he counted wooden beads around a string. He rattled a few coins in his cup as he heard the two walk by. Before entering the tavern, Balak turned to Arda and advised,
"Remember to keep a low profile, and don't let them provoke you."
The tavern was bustling with life. Soldiers bragged of their glory in a recent battle. A handful of Parthian soldiers stood in the corner, stripped of their armor.
"Why have they kept those soldiers? Do they intend to torture them?"
Arda whispered to Balak.
"For ransom. There must be some kind of reward for their lives."
Wordmasters looked for the approval of a small crowd as they exchanged insults in the far corner of the bar, battling with lyrics to the beat of a drum. A few high-ranking soldiers were keeping quietly to themselves. They were drinking tea and obviously were not in the mood to celebrate. At the center of the hall sat a young man with highly decorated armor. Presumably, he was the one who led them into battle. He sat quietly and enjoyed the atmosphere and a constant flow of toasts in his name. People referred to him as Andranik. Arda screwed up her face in disgust at the drunk and smelly men.
"We're looking for a hot meal and a place to stay the night," she said.
The lady behind the bar looked at Balak, then at Arda.
"You will need to pay half in advance," she said, "and we only have one room available."
"That's fine,"
Arda replied. Balak pulled out his coin purse and handed over some silver pieces.
"We'll pay in full. I trust that will cover 2 jugs of ale, 2 meals, and the room."
The woman's eyes widened.
"What would you like, sir?"
"Kitabs, and make it quick," he told her.
"Make yourself comfortable over there, in the corner, by the window. Your kitabs will be brought over soon," she told him.
She then turned to Arda.
"Follow me."
Arda followed the woman behind the bar and through a doorway into a room. There was an open fire, and a kettle had just started to boil.
"There's enough water there to clean up," the woman told her.
"Thank you,"
Arda said. The woman let her be. Arda took the basket from her back and unstrapped the child. She poured the water into the bowl, but before washing she pulled out some of the goat's milk and filled the child's cup. She placed it in the water to warm it up. She changed the child, pulling spotless clothes from her bag. Once the milk was warm, she washed the child down before washing and changing herself. The woman returned, and Arda thanked her. She also took the child's blanket and handed Arda another.
You could use this one while yours dries, the woman said. Your food is waiting with your
grandfather, Arda replied. Arda grabbed her things and hurried through the bar to Balak. She gave the child her milk and placed her in the basket, which she then tucked under the table. She slid her along the floor and into the corner so that she was not in plain sight. The woman at the bar offered Arda a glass of wine, and she accepted. She sipped it as gray smoke started to bellow from the fire, and an old man with a scraggy beard limped over and threw on some wood. The plumes of smoke rose, forming downy clouds. He poked at the wood with a long stick, pushing it farther into the orange flames. The fire cracked and spat before it settled down and the smoke faded. The barkeep approached with their order. Balak rolled one kitab without looking and took a big bite before spitting it all out.
"What's wrong?"
the woman asked.
"Sumac. I don't like sumac on kitabs," replied Balak.
"Didn't take you for a picky eater."
"I am not being picky."
"Fine. I'll get rid of the sumac for you then."
They sat quietly and ate their food. A bard entered the bar and recited a rhyme he had written about the battle to the soldiers.
"The battlefield and its steel are stained with red. Victorious Armida celebrate its bloodshed. For the Darklands this round is their victory. They battled with honor. Many soldiers are dead."
Balak paid no mind to the bard, but watched a dark-skinned man in the corner. He was taking on challengers in an arm wrestle, drinking and enticing soldiers with his stories. He defeated soldier after soldier, becoming more arrogant with each win. The soldiers grew more frustrated, and their frustration led to more drinking. With every swig, they became rowdier. More soldiers lined up to challenge the man, and, in turn, each was defeated. One of the soldiers stood on his chair and thundered,
"Gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?"
The room went silent, and he continued.
"Let me raise this glass in honor of our leader, Andranik, who led us to glorious victory over those Parthian scum."
Almost every soldier in the tavern began to cheer and laugh. A few older and higher-ranking soldiers kept to themselves until one of them had enough and stood up and protested.
"Hollow victory, if you ask me."
The tavern went quiet before some men began to boo.
"Another victory like that, and Armida will have nobody to defend it. The whole kingdom will be left in ruins."
The room went silent. The old man had more to say.
"Before the battle, we had 20,000 men under the sun. I stood there, side by side with you, friends, fighting 6,000 Parthians. Today, I see 2,000 unlucky bastards getting drunk and celebrating their victory and fallen brothers."
The people went silent, realizing their losses and looking at the man with decorated armor, Andranik. One of Andranik's loyalists approached the old man who was giving the speech.
"Calm down, brother. You've said too much."
But the old man ignored his warning, and his fury increased.
"Fuck you, Andranik. You might have won the battle, but you cost us the war,"
exclaimed the old man. 3 more soldiers stood and grabbed the elder. He was still rambling, but they shouted louder than him.
"Can't handle his liquor,"
said one of the 3 soldiers. They laughed as they swiftly removed him from the bar. The soldiers continued the celebration, but Andronic left shortly after with a look of unease. Balak and Arda stayed quiet in the corner. Although they did not wish to be in the midst of trouble, they were grateful that the conflict had kept the attention away from them. The soldiers continued to take part in the drinking challenge, while other men across the room began snorting pixie dust. This caused their eyes to widen and gave them a sudden rush of energy. A towering Amidan soldier with a long beard noticed Balak in the corner. He whispered to his comrades, and 4 of them headed over to their table.
"I think a man of your size would be able to win this man in an arm wrestle. What do you say?"
"Not interested,"
Balak growled, taking a swig of ale.
"We can win our coin back, and we'll buy you a drink. Come on," he said.
"Not interested."
The man's attention then switched to Arda.
"Is this your wife? She looks young enough to be your daughter."
Don't be afraid," another soldier slurred. He grabbed Arda's arm.
"Maybe you should come with us. This man is too old for you. Don't you want to get some real cock?"
He yanked Arda up, and Balak jumped to his feet. He was larger than the soldiers had first anticipated, so they stepped back, all except the soldier who restrained Arda. The child began to cry.
"A child, too?"
another soldier commented. He stepped forward, bowing his head to look under the table.
"Do you really want to do this? Do you think you can take out a tavern full of armed soldiers? Do you really think you'll get your wife, your child, and yourself out of this place in one piece?"
The leader growled. He slapped Balak on the back of his neck several times, a sign of disrespect, as he expressed his dominance. Balak scowled. He stared into the soldier's eyes and said,
"Maybe not a full tavern, but I only need 2 swings for the 4 of you."
In his mind, Balak was playing out quickly, murdering these 4 men, and rushing out the door, when the dark-skinned man interrupted their standoff.
"Care for a friendly competition?"
he asked. The crowd had congregated to watch the arm wrestle. Arda scooped up the child in the basket and grabbed her things before the 2 soldiers pushed her to the back of the tavern. Balak waited at the table until the dark-skinned man sat down before him.
"I'm Zia,"
he told him.
"Balak, now can we get on with it?"
Balak's hand dwarfed Zia's, but Zia did not appear afraid. He was still glowing with confidence.
"Watch me finish my drink as I take on this old man,"
Zia stated to entertain the crowd. The men joined their hands and began. Balak used his bare hand and pushed against Zia's gloved hand. He pushed with all his might against Zia's strength until Zia's arms started to relent.
"By the Maker, this one is putting on a fight,"
Zia stated with a chuckle. But he still put his drink aside to concentrate on the fight. The crowd roared. Zia got a surge of strength and pushed against Balak's large hand. Balak's arms started to move backward, and Zia looked like he would win. But then Balak growled and again put himself in a winning position. A few minutes passed, and the soldiers were loud and thrilled as they shouted for Balak to win. After a while, the men grew restless as the arms of both men pushed back and forth. With one last thrust, Zia was ready to force Balak's arm to the table when he noticed a tall Amidan soldier reaching for his dagger. Balak saw Zia losing his concentration and slammed his hand to the other side, almost breaking the table. Balak stood victorious. Then Zia yelled,
"You're new champion, everyone! Hey, bartender, Make sure those men are well fed and watered. Drinks are on me."
The crowd was ecstatic. Arda released herself from the clutches of the soldiers, approached Balak, and asked, "How did you manage that?"
"I didn't," replied Balak, gazing at Ziyah as he worked the crowd. "He let me win."
"But why would he do that?"
Arda whispered.
"I don't know, but I think we should head to our room. These men have been through battle, and while they're here, this is not a safe place for a child."
Arda nodded. She was still clutching the child tightly. While the soldiers were distracted by the free ale, Balak and Arda nodded to the barkeep and slipped up some steep wooden stairs. A large bed dominated their small room. By the window was a chair, and Balak headed straight over to look out it. Soldiers stumbled out into the street. Some threw punches or drew their swords at one another. One man fell to the ground with the weight of his longsword. Balak pulled the cloth over the window.
"You take the bed,"
he told Arda as he unbuckled his belt. Arda laid the child and her satchel on the bed. She slipped off her shoes and slid them underneath, but she didn't say a word. Balak sat in the chair, peering through a gap in the cloth that covered the window. Arda climbed into bed with the child beside her. She was sleeping soundly, so Arda grabbed the candle and blew gently. They were left in darkness. It was barely morning when Balak woke Arda.
"We should get ready to leave,"
he said, shaking her gently. Arda packed up her things and changed the infant. She fed her milk while Balak paced back and forth. She tied the child to the inside of her cloak as she had previously, and they headed downstairs.
"Thank you,"
Arda said to the barkeep, the same woman as last night. Standing outside the tavern, they once again saw Ziyah petting his strange horse. Arda approached the man.
"I believe we owe you thanks for last night."
Ziyah politely bowed to Arda before gently pressing his lips on her soft hand, saying,
"You don't owe me anything, my lady. My name is Ziyah, and I'm honored to meet you."
"I'm Arda, and this is Balak. Pleasure to meet you, Ziyah."
"The pleasure is all mine."
Arda then looked at Ziyah's horse.
"Is this your horse?"
"Oh, you mean her? It is not a horse. It is a camel. But don't call her that. She doesn't like to be called it, right, darling?"
He petted the camel as it made a strange sound in agreement.
"Her name is Kamala," he added.
Arda smiled and scanned the dusty ground. As Ziyah untied his camel from the pool, he threw a silver coin in the wooden bucket by the man with a cloth tied around his eyes. He nodded toward Ziyah when he heard the coin hit the bottom of the bucket.
"You paid a blind man to watch over her?"
"Oh, that guy. He ain't blind. How do you think he drew that sign?"
They both laughed. Balak approached.
"Arda, we need to go,"
he grunted. Arda ignored him and continued talking.
"Where do you come from, Ziyah?"
"I come from the south, past the Samartan desert."
"But there's nothing beyond the desert."
"That is what many people from this land say, but they are wrong. Beyond the desert is a land the size of Tartaurus, maybe larger, with people, just like you and me. And where I come from, we call it Netheria."
"Amazing. Balak, have you ever been to Netheria?"
"No,"
Balak replied begrudgingly. He started to walk, and both Arda and Ziyah followed.
"Maybe you should. Some sun would be good for you. I have seen corpses look more alive than you,"
Ziyah suggested. Arda burst into laughter. Balak glared at her.
"Sorry,"
Arda apologized.
"Where are you heading?"
Balak asked abruptly.
West,
Zia answered.
Us too. We should travel together. It's safer,
Arda said. Balak's mouth twisted and his eyes widened. He led the way while Arda continued to chatter to Zia. He kept listening to them, and Zia continued telling the girl all about his adventures, shapeshifters, and places outside of time. Arda listened intently, and occasionally Balak would hear her giggle at Zia's jokes. Balak kept leading them through the forest until it started to get dark.
"We should camp down for the night,"
he told them as he came to a stop.
Here? In the open?
Arda questioned.
"There's nowhere else. We'll have to keep a lookout."
Zia tied his camel to a tree while Balak checked the ground for tracks. The mud was disturbed and damp, with the tracks of a small animal and a horse from the previous day.
"Zia can get the firewood,"
Balak croaked.
"Of course."
Zia bowed his head and disappeared into the trees. Arda had unstrapped the child and laid her in the basket.
"I would stay cautious of him,"
Balak told her.
Zia? He doesn't strike me as a threat.
"I mean it, Arda,"
he warned. Arda scowled at him.
"What food do we have?"
I have bread and cheese and berries.
Balak nodded. Zia dropped a pile of wood between Arda and Balak, who set to work on the fire.
"We will need the fire tonight,"
he said. Zia and Arda sat close together and continued to get to know each other. Balak scanned the area and began boiling some nettles in some water.
"This will warm us up,"
he pointed out as he poured the substance into his flask and took a drink.
"Not as good as ale,"
he told them as he offered them a drink. The remainder of the bubbling water was used to warm the child's milk. Arda took the water from him and continued to talk to Zia. An easterly wind blew through her tangled hair, and Balak could smell floral soap as well as damp dirt and moss. He sat on the tree stump by Zia's camel and sipped his hot drink. He could feel the warm liquid slip down his throat, and its sweet taste quenched his thirst.
Are you two related?
Balak heard Zia ask.
He's my grandfather,
Arda answered. Balak screwed up his face and threw her another look as she turned in his direction.
Oh, yeah, I think I am starting to see the resemblance,
Zia confirmed. Arda scooped up the child and began feeding her some milk.
He is very protective of us.
I understand. Zia turned to Arda and whispered to her quietly.
Is he always this quiet?
You're not,
replied Balak, overhearing Zia's question.
What my grandfather was trying to say is that listening is the best way to learn,
Arda told Zia. She gave Balak a scornful look when Zia wasn't looking.
What you did for us was very brave,
Arda told Zia as she attempted to change the subject.
My lady, the possibility of facing an entire army of drunk soldiers doesn't scare me.
What does?
Zia's expression turned sour. He bowed his head and said softly,
Spiders.
Spiders? Are you serious?
Arda repeated in laughter.
Don't laugh. Have you seen those nasty little buggers?
Zia tried to justify his fears.
Especially when they're hairy, are bigger than your hand and jump at you. And still, I didn't imagine that spiders would scare you the most.
Arda laughed again. She placed the snoozing baby back in her basket and sipped the hot drink Balak had given her. Zia also sipped his drink, but almost spat it out as Arda caught his eye again, still amused by the spider discussion. They both laughed. The baby began to cry. Arda turned her head towards her and began to calm her down.
"It's all right, little one,"
she said in a soothing voice.
"What is wrong with her? Is she hungry?"
asked Zia attentively.
"I doubt it. I just fed her."
"Sing her a lullaby, then," Zia suggested. "Balak, do you know any songs?"
"I know many songs," he replied.
"Well, don't hold back. Sing us one."
"I can't sing."
"But you said—"
"You asked if I know any songs, not if I can sing."
"Is he always like this?" Zia asked.
"It's fine. I can sing,"
Arda stated as she began to recount the song from her memory, the Maiden Tower Princess. It was an emotional song of a princess who had to marry a prince she didn't love. She promised to marry him if he would build her the largest tower in all of Tartaurus. Once the tower was built, she jumped off the roof to her death. Both men sat and enjoyed the song. When it finished, all three noticed that the baby had stopped crying.
"It's a beautiful song," Zia noted.
"My mother used to sing it to us."
"Where is she now?" Zia asked. Arda looked at the child again and started telling her story.
"We were in Elbrus when it all happened. I was awakened by my mother, who told me to quietly pack bags of food. We began packing when Dad came back. He wiped the blood from his sword and told us we needed to leave right away. I didn't care to ask then because I knew it would only slow us down. We made our way halfway through the empty city streets when we heard the alarm. When the king died, his allies and enemies began to fight for the city. I couldn't tell one from the other. Dad escorted us to the nearest stable. My mother sat us on the horse and made it obvious that she wouldn't be joining us. She told me to ride to the iron gates and never look back. We rode as far west as we could, but I knew I couldn't have made it entirely on my own. I met my grandpa and told him what happened. I don't know if my parents are still alive, but I hope to reconnect with them once more."
Arda finished and inhaled deeply.
"I am sorry if my question opened any unhealed wounds. If I were there, I might have been able to protect you and your family,"
Zia told Arda. He was looking deep into her eyes, and she instantly blushed. They paused for a moment, and she couldn't help but stare back into his golden eyes.
"You don't exactly strike me as the warrior type. You don't even have a sword,"
Balak interrupted.
"Some fight with iron. I fight with fire in my heart,"
Zia noted.
"Ha!"
Balak laughed with a smirk.
"Have you ever been in a fight?"
"I have fought the living," Zia said, and leaned toward Arda on his left, "and the dead."
"Is this another one of your wild tales?"
Balak objected. Arda scowled in his direction.
"How do the dead fight?"
she asked. Zia got comfortable and began unraveling his story. "I have seen them rise from their own graves. They don't feel fear or pain, thus they have no need for armor or shields, and they will keep coming at you again and again."
"So how do you stop them?"
Arda asked, moving closer to him. "You can't. You just cut off their limbs and hope it will be enough."
"How many dead men have you fought?"
Arda asked. "Oh, not just men," Zia said, turning his head to Arda.
"Dragons?"
Arda whispered with amazement, and Zia nodded in agreement.
"Dragons? A liar will always find what to say,"
Balak growled. He poked at the fire with a stick and threw on some of the wood Zia had collected. It crackled and sputtered as it burned the moss clinging to its flaky surface.
"Are you calling me a liar?" Did I stutter? Or does the truth burn your ears?
Balak asked curtly.
I have lost friends making sure the dead stayed in their graves. You wouldn't be standing here if it wasn't for them.
Why don't you come here and tell me all about it?
Ziyah stood up and made his way to face Balak. He was short, even shorter than Arda, but his confidence could have easily filled the entire mountain range.
Do I need to remind you that I let you win that arm contest?
Arda rushed to put herself between the two men.
Enough! Both of you! You're going to wake up the child. You are lucky she came to save you, said Ziyah before turning around and making his way to the opposite side of the fire, closer to his camel.
Luck has nothing to do with it,
Balak uttered as Ziyah continued walking. He then turned to Arda and told her,
He is nothing but trouble. Are you sure we can trust him?
He helped us at the tavern. We owe him that much. Who knows what would have happened if he didn't intervene?
Arda stated.
Fine, but don't make me regret it,
Balak growled abruptly before they were interrupted by a soft scream.
Keep it down,
Arda whispered loudly to Ziyah.
Sorry, Ziyah said. I just saw a spider.
Balak looked at Arda judgingly before lying down. He rolled his eyes and turned his back to the fire. The leaves rustled and waved gently back and forth above his head. The branches looked like huge arms about to grab him.
Balak,
Arda whispered. She wanted to say something but was too tired to argue. When he didn't answer, she snuggled against the child's basket and attempted to get some sleep. Balak lay with one eye open as a calm, chilly wind blew at his face. He watched as Ziyah slept. He could hear Ziyah quietly snoring. Balak sprayed some water on his face to keep himself awake, but slowly he began to fall asleep.